Hello everyone and welcome to race number 1 in season 4 of the Tom Hanks Racing Series. This time we're racing on Lakeside Bus Stop Circuit, which let's talk about the track for a little bit. It starts with a very fast left-hander, then hard on the brakes into a double apex right-hand corner, which in most cars, depending on gearing, is gonna go in second or third gear, onto a short uphill straight. And you brake just before the crest in most cars, and then in this corner I will try to either completely go around the white area or clip it slightly as you saw there, and then onto the second set of chicanes through the fourth checkpoint. I went a little bit too quickly there, onto a short straight down the hill, and then we get into the final bit of the circuit, starting with a mid-speed left uphill corner and then into a long multiple apex right hand corner that goes uphill and then later downhill, a short little straight, and then into the final right hand bend, which is where aero will come in very handy if you want to maintain the most speed, and then onto the main straight. Alright, with that let's get into the actual competitors. First up we have the Armor Motors Cricket SC6, which in many ways actually drives quite a bit like my own car. It's similar in terms of straight line performance, even though this is a C-class car and mine is an A-class, but it also shares similar handling characteristics. It's got good low and mid-speed mechanical grip, not the most downforce, but it has some just to help a little bit with the faster corners. The only place where I really noticed the difference in weight, because the armor is in C-class, is on braking. So I have to brake a little bit later than with my own car. And just like my own car, it is just a little bit underpowered compared to the top cars, though still a very well-rounded car overall. And with that, enjoy the rest of the lap. Next is a Centuri Hadron Gen 2 TR2A made by Teacup, and this is a fantastic car. It's really quick on the straights. First gear is quite long, but the rest of the gears are stacked very closely together. This car has very good turn in. It's very stable in corner and no understeer to be had there, despite it being front-wheel drive. And it's got a good amount of aero, and the braking performance is the best out of any car. So I'm not surprised to see this car being extremely quick, and I think it'll be hard to beat. Enjoy the rest of the lap. Next is the Epoch M30 Group A, made by EMC2. This car is rear-wheel drive, and it shows that under braking, it shows that when exiting a corner, it really has not enough rear grip to be competitive here, in my opinion. It's hard to make this corner without getting into oversteer. The front is very pointy, which is good, but then the rear end doesn't have enough traction in order to get with it. It's also a little bit slow on the straights, so overall, unfortunately, this just can't keep up. Next is the Gunner Galahad, and just like the Epoch that we just saw, this is rear drive and likes to kick out the rear under power, but unlike the Epoch, there actually is a lot of power in this one, as it is in C-Class and has over 500 horsepower. When you keep the rear in check, this actually corners very well, until you get to the higher speeds where the lack of front downforce makes it understeer quite a bit. And this is probably why it can't quite match the top cars in this field, but it still did fairly well overall. Next we have the ISN Soul A18 Group A by Kenshiro. Overall a very solid car, good power, good brakes, good turning, although the front is often a little bit too eager. In fact, when you get into the higher speeds, it has so much front downforce that it actually starts to introduce turn-in oversteer. Other than that though, this is a very quick and very agile car, and I think this will do very well in the upcoming races as well. This is the Jaeger D300 Group A by Martin 2010, and the basic suspension setup on this is actually very good, nicely rounded, but the two big things that this car is lacking is power and downforce. This makes about as much horsepower as the top cars in A-Class, even though this is in C-Class and weighs a lot more. And the downforce would allow it to go flat out through the first fast left-hander on this track, as well as maintain a lot more speed in the final bend, which is so important because you need to carry that speed onto the main straight. If it had more power and downforce, I could see this doing very well, but as it is, it lands a little bit further back in the field. Next is the Mara Astari 2.0 Group A made by NDD, and this is a phenomenal car. It is very quick in the straights, it's almost as sharp as the ISN when it comes to the turning, but not quite so aggressive that it would introduce turn-in oversteer in the higher speeds. Other than that, it's really good all around. Strong engine, great turning, good brakes, although not as good as the Century, and a decent amount of downforce. Next is the Miller Maple RA 2.0, and this has a very long gearing, but unfortunately it doesn't have the power and torque to make that gearing work. It is also heavier than any other car in A-Class by almost 200 kilos, and as a result of that it's kind of slow on the straights. Unfortunately, it also doesn't have the downforce to take the faster corners quickly, and the braking is not on the same level as other A-Class cars either, due to the car being so heavy. Next is the Minos THRS 2-liter SS, and this is another amazing performance car. Strong engine, good gearing, very good handling, very sharp turning. Not the most aggressive, but still up there. And the brakes are solid, although not the same level as the Century. Overall, this is a great performance car, and I expect this to be one of the top contenders throughout the entire season. Next is the N Motors 2.0i Challenge, made by Drift Phantom. Now this has very good handling balance, it is very agile, it has no understeer, and it takes corners very quickly, it likes the quick transitions. Unfortunately, this engine only makes 208 horsepower, which is by far the lowest out of any A-Class car. And when you've got cars in your same class that make nearly double the horsepower and weigh less, then it means that on the straight bits you're just simply outclassed. This is just simply not up to par when it comes to power to weight ratio. Even in A-Class, it's just simply outmatched by any of the other competitors. Next is the Olympus MO40J Touring, made by Nocturne, and this has been one of the more frustrating cars to test, not because it's bad, but because while it does have good potential, it also has a few pretty glaring weaknesses. So it has good brakes, and in the lower and mid-speed corners it has decent grip as well. It puts the power down well with it being a rear-wheel drive. But in the higher speed corners, this is just lacking front end downforce, and there is a lot of understeer. I think Nocturne said on Discord, if I remember correctly, that he forgot to put on a second aero fixture on the front, and that would explain things. But nevertheless, the car I got is unfortunately not quite up there with the best cars. Next is the Scarab Flare STR, and this is a race car that really wants to be driven hard. The engine wants to be revved in order to make the power, and the aero setup is such that you really need to be going at a good amount of speed in order to make it work fully, and then it really sticks to the road. In the low to mid speed corners, it's not the fastest car, it's decent but not the best, and the braking performance is good, but again, not the best. And if it had the same sort of braking performance that the Century does, then I could see it actually winning this race. But as it is, it doesn't quite win, but it does finish very well, and I can see this doing exceptionally well at tracks like Imola. Next is the Tarquini Vendetta CR, and this is not only one of my favorite looking cars in this season, but it's also a really great car to drive. It is really agile, turns in very well, puts the power down reasonably well. With it being a rear drive, it does like to oversteer sometimes, but when it does, it's nicely controllable. It brakes well. It's just missing maybe like 20 or 30 horsepower to really be in contention for the top places. But what that extra power would do to the traction that it does have at the moment, not so sure. Either way, well balanced car, just not quite fast enough for the top spots. Next is the THRS by Aaron with Pizza, and this is very quick, not only in its turning, but it's also among the quicker cars on the straights, although I feel like if it did have the 50 or so extra horsepower that it could, with it being in B class, then I think it would be a legitimate contender for the win. As it is strong and definitely in the upper tier of cars in this season, but not quite at the top. Very good, very aggressive tuning, and it works quite well. But for the title, it would need to have that extra little bit of power that it could have in B class. Last but not least, we have the Transom Menace BLK by Harmless. This is a B-class car, and with its looks and with its high revving V8, it almost reminds me a little bit of a NASCAR, and it does have very long gearing to match that. The actual handling balance is nice, it's good, but it could use some better brakes, and it could definitely use shoulder gearing and maybe a little bit more downforce as well. Overall, a mid-tier performer, decent but not great, and as I said, with shorter gearing and a little bit more downforce, this could definitely rank a little bit higher. The overall race results will be linked down in the description below. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.